Hi folks, it's 6:30 on my watch, so thank you all for coming. And I assume there's somebody out there, and I'm just not talking to the void, but we'll figure it out as we go along. So I added two comments just to the chat here, and as I mentioned before, um, it's this is about a 3 or 4 hour talk, and we're going to try and compress it down into something a little shorter than that. So. Oh, Evan's here and Todd's here. Hey, good to see you. Um, and okay, well, we'll get started. Uh, on your screen right now, it should say Cottywomple. And hi, Jen. Cottywomple is to stride with purpose toward an unknown or vague destination. And that's sort of what we're going to be doing this evening is a bit of Cottywompling. So you can use that word to win friends, influence people, and stuff like that. So we're talking about DAM, digital asset management. If you're really interested, you can go out and when the bookstore is open, you can go out and buy the DAM book. It actually exists. It's about 2 inches thick, and it goes into much more detail than we're going to cover this evening. But we'll scratch the surface anyway. So um, just to get started, basically, we talked about this before, but yeah, every digital image has two aspects to it. There's the image itself, and then there's information about the image. And it's the information about the image that we're mostly going to be talking about this evening. Um, and So if you were to ask somebody what a raw file looks like, the answer is it doesn't look like anything because all it is a bunch of information. And we take that information and we can morph it around into something that looks like a picture. Um, so the information about the image in the film days was a bit more complicated. It was called pencil and paper. And when you made an image, you would write down, or not, most people not, whatever information you had, the date, the time, where you were, exposure information, stuff like that. Nowadays, of course, with digital, it's much more simple. There are basically two types of metadata. There's information that's recorded at the moment you click the shutter at the time of capture, and then there's information that's added afterwards. So the information that's recorded when you click the shutter is called EXIF information. This stands for exchangeable image file format. And then the information that's added after mostly falls into the IPTC category. You'll be tested on this later, by the way. IPTC stands for International Press Telecommunications Council, and they're an international standard for metadata, mostly for professional photographers dealing with news or product photography, things like that. But they set standards for metadata fields, and there are core fields and there are extension fields. If you have plugins, which are add-ons to whatever software you're using, sometimes plugins will add their own metadata as well. So we've been out shooting and we made a bunch of pictures, and we get back home and there's really two things we need to think about to begin with. One is where we're going to put these images, and the other one is what we're going to call them. If any of you remember the DOS days, then your file names were very restricted. You had 6 characters and a 3-character extension. And nowadays, fortunately, we don't have to worry about that. But for the most part, cameras today record image names as either IMG dash 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 001, for example, or a DSC or a DSCF, and then followed by a number. Depending on the camera you have, you can customize that to some extent. But the first thing you should think about when making your images is renaming them into something else. And there's a few reasons for that. One is, again, depending on your camera, if your camera records images as, say, DSC 001, when you get to DSC 999, some cameras will add another zero and put you at 1000. And some cameras will just revert back to IMG 001 again, or DSC 001 again. And you never want to have two images with the same name. Even if they're in different places on your computer, it doesn't matter. There's just too much potential to overwrite one with the other. Uh, so you want to avoid duplication. That's one of the most predominant reasons for renaming the files. If you shoot professionally, um, then you might want to rename your files as part of your advertising. If you go onto Google and type in IMG001 and hit enter, you're going to get about 14 billion answers to that. But it tells you absolutely nothing. Whereas if you're a wedding photographer and you label your files as, for example, Mike Nelson Petty Photography or Mike Nelson Petty Victoria Photography, and then whatever information after that, then when people go online and do a search for your name, um, then you'll find your images much more readily. And the subset of that is what's called SEO, which stands for Search Engine Optimization. And Google and other search engines prioritize their searches based on certain criteria. And again, if you leave your files named IMG001, then it's not very optimal. So those are some of the reasons you want to think about renaming your images. The second thing to consider, and this, again, is irregardless of software, is where you're going to store them. Now, again, in a paper world, you had a filing cabinet, and the filing cabinet had X number of drawers, and then within those drawers you had folders, and you could stick things in different folders. Well, your computer hard drive, in logistical sense, is very much the same. You've got one or more drives. You may have an internal drive, an external drive, a flash drive, a network drive. And then on those drives, you have one or more folders, and you can have images stored in them. Um, I would recommend that whatever system you develop, and there's no wrong way to do this, but whatever system you develop, you start with one base folder. In Windows, and I believe on Mac as well, you have a pictures folder. So I have all of my images, as well as my Lightroom catalog, my Capture One catalogs, my Lightroom presets, everything in the pictures folder. And there are two reasons for that. One is that I don't have to go searching all over my computer to find stuff. Everything's in that one spot, and I have folders within the pictures folder for different things. And the other thing is, if I back up the pictures folder, I back up everything related to my images. And we'll talk about more about backups in a little bit. So my particular folder structure, and we're going to get rid of the Cottywomple guy here for a second. There we go. Is if you look we're in Lightroom now, and before I go any farther, I'm going to mention I have Lightroom 6.14, which is the last standalone version of Lightroom. I didn't drink the Adobe Kool-Aid and go to, they're calling it Lightroom Classic. There's various reasons for none of them worth going into. As far as I know, Adobe has made a number of updates. I think they're on Lightroom 9 now. They've made a number of updates and additions, but so far as I know, they haven't changed any of the basic structure of the program. So even if you're using a newer version, this should still apply to you. If you're using Lightroom CC, that's the one where everything is stored on the cloud. I've never used it, so I can't really comment on how similar or dissimilar it is. So up here, you can see I have my pictures folder, and then underneath that, I have a Lightroom folder, and everything related to Lightroom, including the catalog, including all of my presets, everything related to Lightroom is in that folder. And then I have subfolders for Marsha's pictures and subfolders for my pictures. And then within that, I have organized by camera. Now, on my internal hard drive, I only have a 1 terabyte internal drive. So I keep my current year images on my internal drive, and everything older goes onto an external drive. So if I go down to Mike's pictures on the external drive, I sort them all by camera, and then within each camera, I sort them by year and by month. You don't have to do this. This is what makes sense to me. But you can, if you shoot weddings, for example, you could organize your images by the wedding couple. If you shoot architecture, you could sort by residential versus commercial. If you're doing product photography, you could sort by. You can do this in any way you want, but just find a system that works for you. And if you want to just dump all of your pictures into your pictures folder, then that works as well. The reason we're talking about digital asset management tonight is no matter where your images are stored, you want to be able to find them. Okay. So once you've made your images, you want to sort through them, you want to decide which ones to keep, and you want to create a structure that allows you to find and organize the keepers. There's an old saying that the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago, and the second best time is today. It's the same thing with digital asset management. The best time to set up a digital asset management structure is when you first begin shooting, and the second best time is today. You can either start now or wait until you have 80,000 images and go, oh my God, I can't find any of them. What do I do? And that's far too common. I'm not entirely immune to it myself. Okay, so what is Lightroom? Well, Lightroom is basically two things. One is that it's a database manager, and the other one is that it's a raw converter. Now, the raw converter part is the develop module. We're not going to be talking about that at all tonight. And the database manager brings us into what is a database. A database is an organized collection of information. So the contact list on your phone is a database. A cookbook is a database. A dictionary is a database. If you go to any commercial website, Canadian Tire, for example, and they have a search function, and then you can filter within the searches, that's a database. So in Lightroom, the database is called a catalog. Now, by default, when you import images, and we'll get to importing in a second, when you import images into Lightroom, it reads all of the metadata from the files and it stores it in its own database, in what's the Lightroom catalog. You can, if you want, tell Lightroom to also add that information to the files themselves, and you can do that automatically or manually. And there are pros and cons to both of those. And I'll give you an example. We'll take this Cottywomple image here, for example. I made this, we'll say I made this image with my camera. I didn't actually, I made it with CorelDRAW. But I import this image into Lightroom. Lightroom reads all of the information, stores it in its catalog. And if I was to go in and edit this image or to add some more metadata to it, anything like that, then Lightroom would add all of that information to the reference that it has related to this image. If I was to go here and say remove photo and remove it from the catalog, gone, okay? All of the changes I've made to that image are now gone, irretrievable. If I had, before I decided to delete it, and take this image instead, and then let's say I've made some changes to this image, and I've added some metadata to it, I've made some develop changes, but I go up here to metadata and I say save metadata to file. Lightroom takes all the information it has in its catalog and adds it to that file. So now if I was to delete that image from the catalog and then re-import it back into Lightroom, when Lightroom re-imports the image, it's going to read all of the metadata that's in the file again. Okay, so that's the difference between having the information only in your catalog and in the catalog and also in the file. It's a functional backup system, so that if you accidentally remove something from your Lightroom catalog, if you have stored the metadata in the file, then it's still there. Um, okay, so we're going to talk more about this as we go along, but that's the basic reason. Now you can tell Lightroom to automatically write everything to the files as you make the changes. You might not want to do that depending on your camera and depending on the size of the files that you're working with, because if Lightroom is making processing changes and making metadata changes and writing to its catalog and also writing to the file, especially let's say you take 100 files and you're adding the same metadata to all of them, then Lightroom has to write all of that metadata to 100 individual files all the same. It's going to slow it down. Okay, so there are pros and cons to automatic versus manual, and there are pros and cons to having all of the information only in the catalog and also in the files. Now, depending on the type of file that you're dealing with, if you're dealing with a JPEG file, a TIFF file, a PNG file, any kind of rendered file format, or if you're dealing with a DNG file, then all of that metadata is stored within the file itself. If you're dealing with a raw file, whether it's a Nikon, a Canon, a Sony, a Leica, Panasonic, whatever, then each raw file is going to have what's called a sidecar file. And the sidecar file has an XMP format. So here I would have LR screenshot. And if that was a raw file, then I would also have an LR screenshot.xmp. And those two files have to be kept together because one contains the image data and the other one contains the metadata. Now, XMP files don't exist on your camera. XMP files are only created when you open your image in a raw processor like Lightroom or like Capture One or something like that. The software creates the XMP file. They're just text files. So if you're using Windows Notepad or an equivalent in Mac, I'm not sure what an equivalent would be, but if you're using a text editor, you can open the XMP file and see what information Lightroom has added to it. So okay, so some people, let me back up a bit. In order to work with an image in Lightroom, you have to import it, okay? And to understand what that means is, all that means is when you import an image into Lightroom, you're not necessarily doing anything to the image. All you're doing is you're creating an association between the image and the metadata and the Lightroom catalog. So Lightroom will say, okay, this file is stored here. It creates a pointer in its catalog that says this image is stored in this place on this disk. Once you've associated an image with Lightroom, it's important to only move that image within Lightroom, okay? Because if you were to create an image, for example, if I take my April 2020 files, there's 167 of them there, if I were to take any of these files, go into File Explorer or Finder on a Mac and move it, then Lightroom's going to say, okay, this image is supposed to be in the Pictures Mike's Galaxy S6 2020 April 2020 folder. It's not there. I don't know where it is. Okay, and you'll have to relink it. Thank you for the comment, Carrie. So once you've created an association with an image in Lightroom, or if you're using Capture One or some other raw converter database manager, then you always want to move it within the program. So if I was going to take, for example, this 2020 folder and move it down to my my Galaxy S6 for my external hard drive, I would take it and I would just drag it down here to my external drive and let it go. I'm not going to do that, but that's all you would do. Okay, yeah, okay. It wasn't unknown, I just canceled it, so let go. So that's, you know, so as I say, once you've created your images, you import them into Lightroom, and when you import it, it does two things. One is it creates a link to wherever that file is stored, and Lightroom doesn't care where you store your images. Okay, you can store them on an internal drive, you can store them on an external drive, you can store them on a network drive, you can store them on a flash drive, you can store them on Dropbox. The only real thing you want to consider is that if you store your images on, say, a network drive, for example, it's going to be slower to access those files. So when you're editing your images, it's going to take a lot longer. A lot longer, and of course, in computer terms, it's pretty tiny, but still, it's going to be slower. Okay, that's just why I keep my current files on my internal drive and my older files on an external drive. Um, Both of those drives are SSDs, and which are faster than hard drives, but that's a whole other topic we're not going to get into. So what it does, it creates an association, and then also because a raw file doesn't look like anything, it's not a picture, it's just information. The program, Lightroom in this case, will create a preview file. So it's a rendered file, a JPEG file. So it takes the information from the raw and creates something that looks like a picture. Now, one thing to keep in mind, when you import images into Lightroom, there are two stages to importing. One is when you import a folder of images or a flash card, a flash drive of images or whatever. First of all, it's going to start reading the metadata and importing those images into the catalog. And once it's done that, it's going to start creating preview files for each one of those images. So there's two stages. If you have a lot of images to import, we'll say 1,000, okay, it's more efficient to take the first half, say 500 images, and import those. And when it starts creating the previews for those first 500 images, then you import the second 500 images. And so now it's importing the second 500 images and creating the preview files for the first 500 images at the same time. And that will use resources more efficiently. It's not more efficient to do it in more than two, but it is more efficient to do it as two than it is to do it all in one big bunch if you've got a lot of images. Now, some people, because of this association with importing and reading metadata and everything like that, and making the images part of the Lightroom catalog, some people prefer to use other software to go through and do their initial image culling. Photo Mechanic is an example. XNView is another example. But that's entirely up to you. So, as I said, the Lightroom catalog is its database. And one question that a lot of people ask is, how many Lightroom catalogs should I have? The general answer to that is, unless you have a specific need, put everything in one catalog. A specific need may be if you have a photography studio where you have more than one person. So let's say you're a wedding photographer and you have two people in the office who are doing edits for various weddings. When you open a Lightroom catalog, it's locked and no one else can access it. So you might want, in that case, you might want to have two Lightroom catalogs. There are those who think, I'll make one Lightroom catalog every year. And you can certainly do that. As I said, there's no wrong way to do this. But let's say you're looking for an image from an office party. Was that 4 years ago? 5 years ago? They're in separate catalogs now. So it's going to take longer to find them. Okay, so in general terms, how many Lightroom catalogs do you need? The answer is one. And again, you can organize your file structure however you want, but do it in a way that makes sense to you. Okay. Now, there are three, there we go, 3 ways to import images into your catalog. Down here, there's an import button, and up here, you can go to File, Import. Okay, that's one way. The second way is to shoot tethered. To shoot tethered, you connect your camera with a cable directly to your computer and shoot into Lightroom. And as you make images on your camera, they're automatically copied to your Lightroom catalog. So that's the second way. And the third way is to use what's called a hot folder. If I get out of here for a second, let me see. Let me take this. I had this set up, but I'm working on two drives here. There we go. So right here we have a Lightroom import folder. I just created this on my desktop. Um, and within my Lightroom import folder, it's empty right now. But if I go to Lightroom and I go to, let me think about this now, auto import, okay? You enable auto import and you go down to auto import settings and it's looking for the Lightroom import folder. Okay? This is what's called a hot folder. So any images I put into that folder on my desktop will automatically be imported into Lightroom and put into my pictures folder into a subfolder called auto imported photos. I can set up the file name, I can add other things to it, but that's another way to import images into your catalog. For the most part, most people use the standard import. Oh, wait, okay. So the import window, come on now, there we go, can look like this. And if this is what it looks like on your screen, then down here there's a drop arrow. And if you click on that drop arrow, then you get a bigger version, okay? So now on the left-hand side, you're going to have where are these images that you want to import, okay? On the top, you have 4 options for what to do with these images. You can copy them as DNG. Now, the thing with RAW files, I don't want to spend a lot of time on DNG, but the thing with RAW files is that they're proprietary. Every camera manufacturer has its own proprietary RAW files, and they seem to be quite picky about that. There are a couple of challenges with that, and one of them is, for example, a long time ago, years ago, Kodak used to have a process where they would scan your images, and they could scan them as JPEGs, but they could also scan them as PCD files. PCD files were a higher resolution, a higher resolution format. The problem is that there's almost no software on the market today that will read a PCD file, and which is not so good. So DNG was created by Adobe, and it was created as an open source RAW format. There are pros and cons to it, and again, we don't have time to get into it, but that's, if you're interested, you can look it up. Copy will leave the image wherever it is now, and then copy it to wherever you tell it to go. Move, as the name implies, will take the image from wherever it is now and move it to wherever you tell it to go. And add will simply add images to the catalog without moving them. So if I was to go to my desktop, for example, and uncheck that one, take the Coddy-Wample file that we removed from our catalog, then I can add it and it'll stay on the desktop. Okay. Now, on this side, we have file handling. The file handling depends, it changes a bit based on which option you have up here. So I'm going to change this from add to move just so you can see. Okay. So up here on the top, it says build previews. And there are, as I mentioned, the raw file doesn't look like anything. In order to be able to display it on your screen, you have to create a preview image. And Lightroom has different previews. There's a preview for the develop module. There's a preview for the library module, which is where you do your digital asset management. But you can create different sizes of previews depending on what you want to do. And you can change the previews that you have for any image later on. So if you just want to import all of your images quickly and deal with them quickly without getting into too much detail, then you can use minimal. When you look at if you shoot RAW on your camera and you look at the image on the LCD screen on the back, you're looking at a JPEG preview of that raw file that the camera has generated, and that JPEG preview is embedded inside the raw file. Okay, so embedded in Sidecar is just importing the preview or using the preview that's already been built by your camera. Again, it's faster. Standard is a larger file format that has to be built for each image. And based on the idea of seeing the whole image on your screen. And we'll come back to that one in a second. And then one-to-one is 100% view. So if you build one-to-one previews, when you import, then if you're looking at the images on your screen, excuse me, and you want to zoom into 100%, if you have a one-to-one preview, then it takes less time. You don't have to build another one. But one-to-one previews take the most amount of space. There is a facility in Lightroom that if you build one-to-one previews, you can have Lightroom discard them after, say, 30 days or however long you want, in order to free up disk space. Okay, we'll come back to the standard here in a second. Now, you can, if you want, on import, automatically back up your files to another location, an external drive, or somewhere else. Add to collection. Collections are groups of images within Lightroom. Okay, so it's not a folder location on your hard drive, but it's like a folder only within the Lightroom catalog, and we're going to talk about collections later. File renaming. Okay, we talked about IMG 001 or DSCF 001 and why you might want to change that. So if you click rename files, then you can click on here, and there are a number of built-in options you can use. Custom name, one of two. Custom name in a sequence, date, file name sequence. You can also create your own. So if I was to go down here to edit, for my camera phone, I use a format of year, month, day, and then a hyphen, and then a sequence starting with 1. Okay. You've got file name and file number suffix. These are all options. You can pick any of these and just insert them, into your file. There's various different numbering systems, one character, 2 characters, all the way up to 6. You can sequence numbers, additional information. You've got dates, hour, minute, second, dimensions, exposure bias. All of this information is information about the image, and you can add any or all of that to your file name. Down here at the bottom, you've got shoot name and custom text. Now, the shoot name, again, if you're a wedding photographer and you wanted to add, Bill and Mary's wedding at the beginning of each of your files, you can do that. Custom text can be anything. Now, if you look over here on the right, underneath the template, there are 2 fields. One says custom text and one says shoot name. Okay, so you would type in, if I was to clear this out, and actually let's just take this and put in shoot name and then a hyphen and then sequence 001. Okay, and now I'm going to save this as a new preset and click done. Come on now. Oh, great, it's crashed. Come on now, don't be doing this to me. Oh, looking at the wrong screen. Sorry. One of the disadvantages of having 2 screens is I'm always looking at the wrong screen. The reason it won't go anywhere is because I haven't told it what to call it. So we'll call this Mary and Joseph Wedding. Okay, create. That's just the name. So now here, under shoot name, I would put in Mary and Joseph Wedding. Start number 1, I can change that if I want, and that's my preset. So if I pick this file and import it, it will rename it from quadiwampel.png to Mary and Joseph Wedding -001. Okay, lowercase, uppercase, that's up to you. Now, continuing on down, it says apply during import. You can, if you want, apply develop settings on import. And there are a number of different develop settings. I have far too many develop presets. Just keep in mind that anything you do here will be applied to every image you import. So I tend to leave that off. And then here it says metadata, and beside that it says Mike 2020. So we're gonna get into that in a little bit and in more detail, but you can create metadata presets. Now, at the top of the comments in the chat, it says that if you go to our website, there are about 90 or so blog posts related to Lightroom. Lightroom allows you to use presets extensively in a number of different aspects of the program, and I have 6 blog posts on using Lightroom presets in various capacities. Okay, keywords we're going to cover again. We're going to cover in more detail in a bit, but keywords are information related to the image or images. I use keywords in 2 different ways. On import, I add shoot specific keywords. So if I was at Beacon Hill Park making pictures of the heron nests, for example, I could add Beacon Hill Park, Victoria, BC, heron nest, rookery, whatever, as keywords that apply to all of the images I'm about to import. Later on, after I've sorted out the images that I'm going to be working with, I'll add specific keywords to specific images. We'll talk more about keywords when we get into that. Okay, so now down here it asks me where I'm going to be putting these images that I'm moving into my catalog. And here it says I can put them into a subfolder. If I check that, I can tell Lightroom what subfolder to create or to use. And down here it says organize, and you have 2 options: into one folder by original, 3 options by original folders. So that's any folders that you're importing from if you already have a folder structure, or by date. So if you were shooting a wedding over a period of 3 days with, the rehearsals and the, the dinner and the wedding ceremony, et cetera, you could, if you wanted to, put, have Mary and Joseph's Wedding as the main folder and then have subfolders for each date within that. So again, this is entirely dependent on, hi Andrew, this is entirely dependent on the way you work, and you get to decide how you want that to work. Okay, this is I've only got 3 images on the desktop, but if you want to look at a specific image like this one, you can click this and you get the loop view. Oops. There we go. Or you can go back to the grid. Each one of these images has a little checkbox, and you can decide by checking or unchecking which images you want to include in your current import. You can, all of the images that are in whatever folder you're looking at, so if I was to take these ones, for example, or include subfolders here, these are pictures of my grandsons, not made by me, but sent to us. So I can choose, which images I want to import and which ones I don't. Stuff like that. So And then you can organize them by file name, by media type. So there's a couple of movie files, not in this folder, but anyway. Okay, so you get all that set up the way you want. And one thing that down here at the bottom, it says preset. So let's go back up here for a second and go back to this one image. If I click on this, these are called import presets. Now, I admit I don't use Lightroom for my Sony A7R III files. Thank you, Sugaya. I still use it for my cell phone files. There's a couple of reasons for that, not worth going into. But when I create a preset, we'll use this one for example, what it does is it tells Lightroom that I'm going to take whatever image I choose, I'm going to put them in my Mike's Galaxy S6 2020 folder. I'm going to add these keywords to every image. Now, if I was in Vancouver or Kelowna or Port Renfrew or somewhere else, I would change that. But these are shoot specific keywords. I'd be using the Mike 2020 metadata. I don't use develop settings on import. And I could rename them to Mike's camera phone. Okay. And so all of this information is set up and then stored in one preset. If I was importing images from Marcia's phone, I would use the Marcia 2020, which has Marcia's cell phone instead of Mike's cell phone, as metadata related to her copyright rather than mine. It goes into a different folder, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so I'm just going to cancel out of that because we don't have to import anything at this point. Now, if I was to click on this image and just make it bigger, one of the the previews, one of the options was standard. And the question is, how big is standard? Because if you go to your preferences and go to, sorry, not preferences, but to catalog settings, drag that over here, go to catalog settings, drag that over here. Come on, there we go. Under file handling, it says standard preview size. Now, I have two 4K monitors, so I have my preview size set to 3840 pixels. But it depends on the resolution of your camera, or not of your camera, but of your monitor. Okay, so I'm just going to close this out for a minute, and if I pick an image from here, that's a picture of Buster. I need a landscape image. Let me just take this one of my grandchildren. Okay, so this is the full screen preview. But how big is that? You know, on your monitor, how many pixels is that from there to there? Well, there's an easy way to find out. What you want to do is you create a screenshot of your monitor, and how you do that depends on your computer and keyboard layout. But you create a screenshot and save it as a JPEG somewhere like your desktop, and then you can import that screenshot, which is what this is, into your Lightroom catalog. If you go to the develop module, come on now, and go to the crop tool. Okay, we select the crop tool, and now we're going to take the entire crop of that image. Okay, so that corner to corner is the full size of the image, but that tells you nothing, right? But if I press I over here, it tells me that this image is 3,840 by 2,160 pixels. Okay, now of that, I really only need, of that, I really only need the actual picture. So as I move this handle around. It's taking a little slow because of the I've got 5 different programs running. Um, yeah, man. Anyway, that's close enough. So now we're down to 3,000 by 1699. Again, it depends on your computer resolution, on your monitor resolution. If you have a full HD, then your maximum resolution is 1920 by 1080. If you have 720p, then it's 1360 by 720. There's no point in making a 4,000 pixel preview if you can only see 1360 pixels on your screen. And so by doing that, you can figure out how many pixels you need for your particular monitor, and then set that as the standard if you're going to do standard image imports. So we're just going to get out of that and do that and go back to the grid. Okay, so now one thing I mentioned on import is you have the option to back up your images when you import them. And I'm just going to take a second to talk about backups. And I remember when I was in school earlier in the last millennium studying geographic information systems, one of our profs told us about, he didn't do it to us, fortunately, but he talked about having a class where, they gave everybody about 5 or 7 pages of information to type in and set them all to work. And then they waited until everybody had about, 3 or 4 pages done, and then they shut off the power. Poof, everything gone. Okay. It's important to remember that we have books that are like 500 years old, but all digital data is ephemeral. So you should back up everything. How often you back up is a simple answer to that question. How much can you afford to lose? Okay. I tend to back up my computers once a week, sometimes more often, depending on how many images I have and what other kinds of information, what other kinds of programs I'm running. Some people, businesses tend to back up every day. Again, this is a much larger discussion. We don't have time for it because, I only got 40 minutes before Marcia cuts the power. um, and But when we're talking about backups, there are 2 aspects to backing up. One is to back up your catalog, and you can tell Lightroom to back up your catalog every time you exit, once a week, once a month, whatever settings you choose. But that will not back up your images. It only backs up the catalog. And So, as I mentioned earlier, I have everything, including all of my images and my Lightroom catalog, all in the pictures folder. And so when I back up my pictures folder, I back up everything related to my photography. And Also, I don't use the default Lightroom backup. There's a plugin for Lightroom, drag this over here, called LR Backup. There it is. And It backs up your Lightroom catalog and compresses the catalog, backs up your configuration files, et cetera, et cetera. It's not free, but it's not very expensive. I think it's donationware, actually. And what I do is I have a Dropbox account, and I back up my Lightroom catalog to the Dropbox folder on my hard drive, and then that backs up the catalog to Dropbox in the cloud. And so I have my Lightroom backup plugin configured to back up my catalog once a week. It compresses it, stores it in the C:/Dropbox folder, and then Dropbox uploads it to the cloud. Now, the other thing to be aware of with regard to Lightroom catalog backups is that there's a great facility to back up your catalog, but there's no built-in facility to remove old backups. Now, one of the 150 odd tutorials we have on our blog, and this is not my information. I just copied it from someone else and linked to his site. You can create a simple batch file that, again, for me, it runs once a week, usually on Wednesdays, and it'll go to my backup folder and delete anything that's more than 2 months old. Because if you've been using Lightroom for a few years, and if you have, like me, I've got close to 90,000 images on here, you may be surprised to find that you have 20 or 30 gigabytes of old backup catalogs that you didn't know were there. And so the blog post is for Windows, although if you know anything about computers, you could probably figure out a similar way to do it for Mac, or you can find out somebody who does. But so backup, but also be aware that old backups are not automatically removed, and you may want to go through and delete some old backups. Okay. Good. Okay. So this is Lightroom. If you're not overly familiar with it, Lightroom has a number of different modules. There are actually more than are developed here. There's also the web module. I never use the web module. If you right-click on it, you can decide which ones you want to see or not. The develop module is where you do all of your image processing. Slideshows allows you to create slideshows, print creates prints. But the library module is where you do all of your digital asset management, okay? And that's where Lightroom tends to start by default. So again, on the left side of your screen, you have your file folder and hard drive or drive structure. So I have up at the top, all photographs, previous export. This is previous photos missing, but it says 214, but that's a bug because there are no photos missing, so I just ignore it. These are my folders, and I have my hard drive, and I have my external drive, and anything that's plugged in to your computer will show up here. And if it doesn't, or if you want to add something, you can add a new folder. You can delete an existing folder, and when you delete it, you can either delete it from the catalog or you can delete it from the disk. Same thing with files. It's important to remember, if I go down here and say remove photo, you have two choices. One is to leave the photo on the hard drive, but disassociate it, so remove it from the Lightroom catalog. And the second one is to delete it completely. Okay, so understand the difference between those two, because yeah, otherwise it can be not so good. Okay, so this is, we'll get to collections in a bit, but on the left side is your file folder structure. And if I wanted to get access to a parent folder, I can show parent folder. I can hide the parent. I can create new folders inside. I can save metadata, synchronize. If I was to go into Windows Explorer, for example, or Microsoft Finder, and dump a bunch of images into this folder outside of Lightroom, why you would want to do that, I don't know, but you could. If I right-click on it and say synchronize, then or if I went into and deleted a bunch of files, basically Lightroom is going to check its catalog and what it thinks is supposed to be in that folder with what's actually in the folder. And it will allow you to import anything that's missing, and it will ask you if you want to remove anything that's missing, okay? Anyway, you can play with this more yourself. On the right-hand side, the histogram, which again, we're not going to, these are an image to look at. We're not going to be dealing with image processing, so we're going to ignore that for now. This is the quick develop and allows you to do some simple processing. And I left it up just to mention one minor thing. If you go into the develop module, okay, I go to exposure, for example, and increase it by, say, 1 stop or 0.8 stops. Okay, that's an absolute adjustment. So it's taken whatever the value is and increased it by 0.83 stops. Now, if I do that, okay, Todd's asking about person. Yeah, we're going to come back. We'll be dealing with people later on, so just be patient and we'll get to you. But this is an absolute value. Okay, so if I was to go back to the library module here, and if I go to, let's pick on this folder because I picked on it before, and take these 4 images, and the exposures are all different. But if I go to the develop module and say increase exposure by 1 stop, it's going to add 1 stop to every image. Okay. So no, correction. It's going to set everything to +1 stop. All 4 images will be set to +1 stop. Okay, I don't want to do that, so I'm just going to delete it. And now in the quick develop module, I'm going to, oh, forgot to hit enter. There we go. In the quick develop module, anything that you change here is relative. Okay, so if I increase this by 1 stop, it will take all of these and add 1 stop of information to it. Okay, so the difference is if this picture, for example, the one on the left, was 3 stops underexposed, and I set it to +1, then it would increase the exposure by 4 stops to make it to +1. Okay, if this image was 3 stops underexposed, and then quick develop, I said increase by 1 stop, now it's going to be 2 stops underexposed. So you see the difference? So one in the develop module, it set an absolute value of +1 EV. In the quick develop module, it increased the exposure value by 1. So it's a difference of going from -3 to +1 or from -3 to -2. Same thing with clarity, same thing with vibrance. So if you want to increase the exposure of all 4 of these by 1/3 of a stop, but not set them all to exactly the same value, then you use quick develop. Okay, and that's all I'm going to talk about quick development tonight because we have other things to deal with. Okay, keywording. Keywording is one of the most valuable ways you have of dealing with your images in terms of finding specific images. As I mentioned, I use shoot specific keywords on import, and then I go back and add image specific keywords later on. Okay, now there are 3 parts to keywords. There's the keywording tab, and in the keywording tab you have the keyword set. Okay, Marcia and I, we like to give hugs to people. We've hugged in the last 10 years, we've hugged people from 88 countries. And we haven't done it, unfortunately, because of the pandemic. We haven't been able to hug people since the 1st of March. But a keyword set allows you to group up to 9 keywords related to a specific and again, as I mentioned earlier, there are presets. Okay, so if I have a wedding photography preset, for example, I could have these 9 keywords, and these are 9 keywords that I'm going to add to a lot of my images. Maybe not every image has the bride in it, maybe not every image has the groom in it, but these keywords tend to go together. Okay, if I choose an outdoor photography preset, then you've got seasons, we've got landscape, macro. Again, these are keywords that go together. So keyword suggestions relate to ones that you've used recently. As you add keywords, it'll change what's down here. Okay, so this is a keywording tab. Underneath that, you have the keyword list tab. So this is all of the keywords in your catalog. I have over 4,000 of them. And there is it's not a bug, but it is a defect in Lightroom in that Lightroom decided that this tab, this keyword list tab, should have, I think it's 3,000 pixels devoted to it. Okay, which is fine, but because I have 4,000 keywords, I can get down to, as you'll see in a moment, the Fs. Anything beyond that is still in Lightroom, it's still in my keywords, but I cannot access the list. So golf or hotel or island, they're there, Inner Harbor, but I can't access them from this list. There are other ways to access them, but just so you're aware of it, it's a bit annoying. Now, there are, when we talk about keywords, um, then there are two ways to work with keywords. One is what's called a flat file. So every keyword is just, in line with every other keyword. And the other one is to use what is called nested keywords or parent and child keywords. Now, what I do is any image that I take of a plant, I take the common name, in this case, lady's mantle, and I use it as a child keyword inside the scientific name. Now, because this is a child keyword, if I type in up here in the keywords panel, if I type in lady's mantle, it will add lady's mantle to it, and it will also add the scientific name. Okay, so if I go down here to somewhere here, oops, too far. I have a keyword for BC somewhere. I don't see it. It's unusual because I do have one. Um, and I have BC inside as a keyword within British Columbia. So if I was to apply the BC keyword here, there it is, then it will automatically add BC, but will also add British Columbia. Now you're thinking, I don't see British Columbia. Okay, so go up here, it says enter keywords. So now what you're seeing are all the keywords that I've entered. If I go down here and say keywords and containing keywords, now you can see that it's added British Columbia as well as BC, okay? Because BC is a child keyword within British Columbia. Now, I haven't yet, but I could if I go down here to it's too far. Yeah, I have BC Ferries, BC Fire Expo, BC Heritage Fair, et cetera, et cetera. I could put these all as child keywords within BC. So if I did that, then if I typed in BC Archives, it would automatically add BC Archives. It would add BC, and it would add British Columbia. Okay. Uh, so if I pick a keyword, and let's go back and find one, like this is Australagus. If you click on it, you can see that now, wasn't ready for you yet. It's hard to see probably on the video, but if you get your own Lightroom catalog, you'll see that some of these arrows are made up of little dots and some of them are solid. The solid ones have child keywords and the ones with the little dots are just straight flat. Okay, so if I click on one that has a solid, then it shows me what keywords are within that. Okay, now over here on the right is numbers. Okay, so if I take spotted laurel, for example, it's got a 2 beside it, and beside that is an arrow. If I click on that, it will show me the images that have the spotted laurel keyword. It's going to take a second to come up. I'll just close it. So these two images have the keyword spotted laurel. Okay, Auburn has 29. Aubrey is my wife's uncle. The Atrium, the one on Blanchard and Yates, has 8. Okay, August has 5,612. Here's one that's been misspelled. Oops. And odds are pretty good if I go down and look up airport. Yep. So I've got 35 images with the keyword airport, and then accidentally have one that has a misspelling of airport. So I could go in here and try to edit it and change it to correct it like that. But Lightroom's not going to let me do that because I already have an airport keyword. Okay. While I'm here, synonyms are other names for the keyword. So if this, for example, if this was a keyword of, say, largemouth bass, if you're a fisherman, then within synonyms I could have black bass, green bass, bucketmouth bass, you know, and other things that relate to it as well. Anyway, back to this. Lightroom's not going to allow me to correct this error because the keyword tag airport already exists. But what I can do is I can say, okay, I've got 3 images that have the incorrect airport keyword. So I can click on that. It's going to bring them up. Come on. There we go. It's reading them from the hard drive, from the external drive. I can select them all. I can go up here to my keyword list, and now I can correct it up here. So now it's going to remove the AUIRPORT keyword and add these 3 images to the list of those that have airport, like so. And now it's saying no photos match the filter because the AUIR port keyword doesn't have any images associated with it. So now I can go over to metadata and I can go down here and say purge unused keywords. And that'll go through the list, and any keywords that don't have any images associated with it will be deleted. Okay, close that. So that's a little bit of working with keywords. You can add keywords to an image. If we pick this one, for example, which is from Ross Bay Cemetery, you can add keywords by typing them in. You can add keywords up in here by clicking on the box and just hitting comma and typing. As you add keywords, it will automatically suggest. Okay, so let's think of a keyword I could add. Tombstone, for example. Okay, I don't have a tombstone keyword yet, but if I hit enter, it will add it now to the list. Okay, there's actually no tombstone in that picture, so we can delete it, but that's basically the way it works. You can also add keywords by clicking on the check mark on the keyword list. Okay, so if I check on that, it's going to add 4 images to that to the keyword list for that image. So keywords are very, very powerful very powerful tools. They are a pain in the butt in that it can take a long time to go through and add them. But when it comes down to searching your images, this is one of the most powerful tools you have. And to start, if you don't have keywords, you can either just start creating one, just add keywords to your files, and create your own keyword list. You can, if you go online, you can buy one, buy keyword lists, either general ones or more specific ones. There's a website called Lightroom Keyword List Project, and they have a downloadable file that you can get for free that has a keyword structure. Um, you're welcome to use that. I'll add that link to the comments in the photo meetup page. So anybody who wants it, you can have my keyword list if you want, but it's going to have a whole bunch of stuff that doesn't relate to you. So it's probably not relevant. This one other way you can add keywords. Now, if you're adding keywords to multiple files, so for example, if I was to go down here and pick these 4, 5, 6, 7, come on, it's running very slowly. Anyway, if I wanted to add this, say the keyword calendar to those 7 images, I can just select them and type in calendar, and it'll add the same keyword to all 7 of them at the same time. So you can control select or shift select multiple images. And the other thing you can do is down here on the bottom of your, way down here, is your toolbar. If you don't have a toolbar, you press the T key. Oops, not, yeah, make sure you're not in your keyword list at the same time or it's going to try and make a new keyword. So yeah, if you press T, it's really not working with me here. There we go. Press T, you can hide the toolbar, and if you press T, you can show the toolbar again. And down here on the bottom right of the toolbar where it says thumbnails is a drop arrow. And these are the various tools that you can add or hide from your toolbar. But one of them over here, get rid of that, is called the painter. Okay. And if I click on the painter tool, then I can paint my images. I can't actually put paint on them, but I can paint different things. So if I click on this and say keywords, and now if I add the keyword, say family, okay, and hit enter, or I could put Hope, because this was in Hope, BC. Okay, so now I've got 3 keywords there. I can take my painter tool and I can just paint over top of my images, and it'll automatically add those keywords to those images. So if I click on that one, and you can see it says assigned keywords family, Hope, and BC. Okay, if an image already has that keyword, it'll just ignore it because it won't put it in twice. So the painter tool is something very handy. Now, that's about all we're going to talk about keywords for the moment, except for people. I haven't forgotten about you, Todd. We'll come back to you. The next section is metadata. Now, the metadata tab is, I mentioned, is information about your images. And there are 2 types of metadata: information that's captured at the moment of capture and information that's added to the images afterwards. This is running a little slowly. I wonder if it would let me. No. Unfortunately, one of the reasons I've had to abandon Lightroom is that, as I mentioned, I didn't like the Adobe CC model, and let's drag this. Drag this over here. Come on, over you go. That's it. Okay, try this again. It's going to close my keyword list. You can, by the way, if you right-click on these panels, you can decide which of these to use or not. If you go to solo mode, I don't like solo mode, but some people do, then if you open one panel, it'll close all of the other panels. Um, and I'm going to change this to EXIF and IPTC, or not. There we go. Okay, so metadata is quite extensive, can be quite extensive, and it depends on your camera and what information it captures, but it can include the dimensions of the image. It can include the exposure information. It can include whether you had a flash, the focal length of the lens, the equivalent focal length, because this was made with a cell phone, so it was a 4.3 millimeter lens, but 28 millimeter equivalent. The date and time it was captured, the name of the camera, in this case was a cell phone, the software for the camera, GPS information if you have GPS, et cetera, et cetera. So this is all EXIF information. Okay. And then the IPTC information includes, as I say, information that's recorded afterwards. So I have my contact information. I don't put my, because I don't shoot professionally, so that doesn't need to be there. That's their website. Now, these IPTC values are international standards. And if you're a news photographer, for example, or something like that, there are specific codes. If you go to iptc.org, I think it is, it will tell you what the standard codes are for different fields. And but if you're not, a professional photographer, or even if you are, but you don't shoot for a news bureau like AP or anybody like that, if you're shooting for yourself, you can use whatever you want in these fields. So your headline could be, under headline, you could put bridal shots. Oops. Under subject code, you could put, whatever you want. You can set up these fields whatever makes sense to you. And you can apply them to one image, to more than one image. You've got genres. If you're shooting product photography, you could put, shampoo bottle, and you could put front. Oops, that shouldn't be there. You can use these if you're not shooting for an agency, then you can set up these however you want, but pick something that makes sense to you. Job identifier could be, it could be a Mary and Joseph's wedding. For example, copyright information, my images, because I don't shoot professionally, all images are copyrighted either to you by default, or if you're shooting for someone else, then they get copyright. That depends on the contract. Sorry to see you go, Tim. And then down here I have plugin metadata. So this is plugins that I have and metadata that they add. Okay. So we're going to skip past that part. Now down on the toolbar, you've got 3 sets of ways you can classify your images. You've got flags, stars, and color labels. Flags, as far as I know, are unique to Lightroom. And you can either mark an image as unflagged, a pick flag, or a reject flag. So if I was to take these images of Marcia from New Year's Day, select them all, I could go through them and decide which ones I wanted to keep. Now, in order to review your images, Lightroom gives you a number of facilities to do so. There's the survey view down here on the bottom. It says survey view. If I click that, it'll show me all of the images that I've selected. And if I go and pick this one, for example, you can see that I can add a flag to it, or I can add a star value to it, or I can add a color label to it. Click one closer in the middle so it's easier for you to see. Um, compare view is the one beside survey view, the one with XY. Compare view still has all of those images selected, but it's only showing me two at a time. So I'm comparing this one to this one. One advantage of compare is that I can zoom in. Okay, so now I can see that this one is slightly out of focus. So I can mark that one as a reject. Okay, and then I can go on to the next one. And I'm not going to go through all of these, but again, that one's slightly out of focus, so I could reject that one. Um, down here on the bottom, I can, this is the what's called the most selected. So this is the one against which I'm comparing. And I can swap the two images. So if I liked this one better than this one, I could swap them. Okay, and make this one now the most selected. I'm not going to do that because this one's out of focus. And I can also take this one and simply push it over there. I can move back and forth between all of the other selects by moving these arrows. Okay, and if I click on the X over here, I can remove this one from the selection. Okay, now the camera changed between this image and this image. Down here, there's a little lock icon. If I unlock it, I can move this one down, zoom in, zoom out, so I can bring it back into line with the two. Come on now, give me a hard time. Okay, if I press the I key, I can get rid of those. Now if I lock it, again, from the position that it's in, it'll move both of them together. Okay, I can zoom in up to 8 to 1, but I'm not going to, or sorry, 11 to 1. 1 to 1 is generally enough to be able to discern. And so that's the compare view. And back to the grid. Now you can either go through your images. Also on the bottom right-hand side here, it says thumbnails, and these are considered thumbnails for your images. By moving the slider, I can make the thumbnails bigger, and thus, be able to compare more readily. If I want to say 3 o'clocks, let's close this panel because we don't need that extra space. There we go. So I could, if I wanted to, go through and mark each of these with a P for pick, meaning it's a good image, a U meaning it's a maybe, or an X meaning I'm definitely not going to keep it. I can, but again, Lightroom is the only one that works with flags. Now, one quick tip: if you're using flags on your images or anything else for that matter, if you turn on the caps lock key, let me just hit the backslash here. So now this is the only image selected. If I turn on caps lock and hit P, it automatically jumps to the next image. So this one I'm going to mark as a reject, U for unmasked or unflagged, and it'll automatically jump one image at a time. The keyboard shortcut for the pick flag is P. The keyboard shortcut for the unflagged is U, and the keyboard shortcut for rejects is X. And again, there's a lot more. But if you're working with other programs, they will not recognize these flags. Star ratings are what you consider to be the quality of your images. Okay, so you can mark each image from 1 to 5, and that's entirely up to you. You may decide that anything worth printing is a 5, anything that's worth thinking about is a 3. Star ratings will move between programs. So if I was to star rate this image here as a 3 in Lightroom and then open it in Capture One, when Capture One, assuming I had written the metadata out to the file, when I opened it in Capture One, it would automatically read the star rating. Color labels are, again, not universal, and the color labels can mean different things. So if I go up here to the metadata tab, and go down to color label set, I have bridge default, Lightroom default, or review status. But if I was going into Capture One, for example, Lightroom has 5 or 5 color labels. Capture One has 6. So they're not universal between programs. But if I go to color labels and go to Lightroom default and then edit, then just drag this over here, I can decide that a red is worth considering. Oops, keep my caps lock off. Yellow is definitely not. Purple is send to printer. So again, these are whatever you want them to be. Okay, I'm not going to keep that, but so these are ways that you can set up your criteria or classify your images. Okay, and the last way to it's going to make my thumbnail smaller here again. The last way of adding metadata to your images is with the people. And then down here, you've got the people view. Okay, so let's go over here to 2020 and let's click on people. Okay, so these are within my 2020 folder. And if you go here to library, you can show subfolders and show photos in subfolders or not by checking that off or on. I've got it on right now. So it's if I click on here, it's showing me all of the images in all of these 5 months. Okay. So to start with, it's not going to have a name associated with anybody. And if you tell it to, and you can, if you want to go up here to metadata and go to, sorry, library. Can't remember now. I don't use this very well, very often. People, there we are. You can find similar faces. Okay, but basically, when you turn on People View, Lightroom's going to go through all of your images and try to find faces. Okay. Now, sometimes, as with the snowman, it's going to find a face that's not really a face. So you can simply uncheck that. Okay. This is actually a little tiny pattern. I'm not sure how I thought that was a face, so we can turn that one off. This is a character in Marcia's book, Timothy Mouse, and it's wanting to know if it's Vanessa. Obviously, there's a certain resemblance. Don't tell her that, but it's not Vanessa. Okay, and no, it's not Vanessa. So it wants to know who it is. I'm going to turn that off. Now, this picture is my grandson Gregory. So if I click on that, I can type in Gregory. Okay, and now it knows that's Gregory, and it's going to add Gregory up here. This is my grandson Beckett. I could do the same thing. I could click on it and type in Beckett, or I could just take Beckett and add it to this list. Okay, this is obviously a plate of fruit. It's not a face. And this is Beckett, but he's got his helmet on. And if I double click on this, it's going to bring up the full image. Okay, now there are no faces showing in here, so I'm just going to click on this and delete it. And we'll ignore that. So if I go back to People View, this now in People View, sorry, back to where was I here? Me. Okay, so let's go to this picture here. This is my daughter-in-law, Jennifer. So if I click on people, it's not working the way it's supposed to. Why is it not working the way it's supposed to? I know. We're going to be a little bit longer, darling. She didn't put the power off, but she's thinking about it. There we go. I should be able to. come on now, draw a face region. That's what we're looking for. Okay, so I can take this, draw a box around this face, and it wants to know who it is. So it's Jennifer. Okay, so it now knows that that's Jennifer. And if I zoom out, and see, it's automatically figured out that that's Beckett. So now, if I go to my keywords over here and go up to keywords, go up to keywords and keywords, keyword list, and go down to B, and go to Beckett. And I have 433 images with the keyword Beckett. So if I click on that, no matter what camera, no matter what folder on this, Todd, this is the answer to your question. No matter what folder, what camera, anywhere in my Lightroom catalog, any images of Beckett. Now, right now, you're only seeing, because I'm in loop view, you're only seeing the one image. If I click on grid, then these are all of the images with Beckett. Okay. Now you can add keywords without adding a face region. Even if you have like um, an image of Beckett. If we go back to here, for example, and take a picture, take this image. That's a video, but take this image where there's no face of Beckett. I could draw a face, or I could just add the keyword Beckett, and that one I would still know. Okay. So that's an hour and a half's worth, and Marcia's already reminded me, an hour and a half's worth of how to get metadata attached to your images. And then the question is, now that you've got metadata attached to your images, what do you do with it? How can you use it? And there are really two ways you can do this. One is to filter out images from your entire catalog, and the other way is to filter out images from a specific folder, or if you have subfolders selected, then within subfolders. So up here at the top, you have the filter bar, and if you don't see your filter bar, then you press the backspace key, the backslash key, and there you go. Okay, and the filter bar allows you to work with your pick flags, your star ratings, your color labels, and your metadata, and to filter out specific images. So there are three different options: text, attribute, and metadata. If you click on text, then there are three fields, if you will. So you have any searchable field, you have file name, copy name, title, caption, keywords, searchable metadata, searchable IPTC, searchable EXIF, or any searchable plugin field. So remember, under IPTC, I said if you wanted to put Mary and Joseph's wedding under a heading, then you could search for Mary and Joseph's wedding using that category in your metadata. Okay. If you search for, if you had a keyword, for example, if I say keyword contain all, and I type in Beckett, then it's going to pull up, except I misspelled it. If I could help, if I could type, it's going to pull up any images that have the keyword Beckett attached to them. Okay. Now, attribute, come on now, works with your flags, your stars, your color labels. So if I wanted to know, because you see text is still highlighted, so it's still showing me anything that has the keyword Beckett. If I wanted to have anything that had the keyword Beckett that also had a pick flag, then I could click on that. And now you see I have one image that has a pick flag that has the keyword Beckett. Okay. If I undo that, then it's showing there are no attributes being used. If I had, let's make these three images here, we'll put them with the red color label, for example. There they are. So now if I chose the attribute of images that had a red color label, it would show me that have the, come on now, there we go, that have the keyword Beckett. So you can use these in combination, okay? Now for star ratings, there are three options: greater than or equal to, less than or equal to. So if I have greater than or equal to 3 stars, it'll pick anything that is 3, 4, or 5 stars. If I have less than, it's pretty obvious. Just equal to means only 3 stars, or only 2 stars, or only 1 star. Okay. If I take these 3 images and uncheck the color label, then now it's not going to find anything that has a red color label because they don't exist. Okay, so I can uncheck that. The other thing to say about attribute is that over here it says kind, and there are 3 kinds of images in your Lightroom catalog: master files, virtual copies, and videos. So I can select only master files, only virtual copies, only videos, master photos, and virtual copies, etc., etc. Anything like that, okay? Metadata, it defaults to, I think, 4 columns. Here we have keyword, camera, lens, and color label. If you click on a specific field and click on there's a little 3 column or 3 bar here, then I can add another column, okay? Or I can remove a column. This one doesn't have any attribute related to it, but let's say I picked GPS data, okay? So I have 33 images that have GPS data. If I wanted to change that to focal length, then all 33 images in this folder have the same focal length. You know, so again, you can pick whatever field you want. So clicking on the left side changes the attribute, and clicking on the right side allows you to add or remove columns in your metadata. And again, you can have, it's still only looking for images that have the Beckett keyword attached to it. That's why there's only 33. But now it's showing me that of those 33 images, all of them were shot with the same camera. Okay. And if you click none, it turns off the metadata. Now, over here on the right, it says filters off. Okay. These are filter bar presets. Again, there are a number of built-in ones. You can also create your own and edit them. So I'm not going to talk about that too much. And then finally, over here on the right, there's a lock icon. Okay, so if I was to go back here and set keywords to Beckett, okay, and it shows me that there are this many images that have the keyword of Beckett, the lock icon is off. If I go to this folder now, okay, it didn't keep what I was looking for. It's gone back to none. Okay, and if I go back here, I've lost my filters. Okay, so if I go back here again and say keywords Beckett, but this time now I turn on the lock icon. If I go back to a different folder, like this one, for example, it's still showing me no matter which folder I go to, it's only showing me images that have Beckett. Okay, so when you lock this, it locks the attributes that you're looking for no matter which folder you go into. Okay, this brings us to the last section we're going to get to tonight before Marcia comes and drags my chair out of the office, and that is collections. Okay, now there are 3 types of collections, and collections, as I mentioned earlier, yeah, Sequoia wants to know where the hour and a half went. So do I. There are 3 types of collections in Lightroom. And as I mentioned, a collection is a folder that exists It's like a folder that exists within the Lightroom catalog only. It does not exist as a separate folder on your hard drive. So we have a target collection, dumb collections, and smart collections. Okay. Now up here on the top left side, you have the quick collection. By default, the quick collection is considered the target collection. Okay. So if I wanted to add images to a collection quickly, okay, let's say I pick these 5 images here of Beckett, okay, and I want to add them quickly to a collection, I can do 2 things. I can press the B key, and that's B as in Bob, not V as in Victor. I can press the B key. Up here in the top right of the image, there's a little circle, and if I click on that, it says Add Photo to Quick Collection. So if I do that, it's going to add these 5 images, and you can't see it probably on the video, but if you look on your own Lightroom, you'll see it's changed from being clear to being slightly gray. And up here now in Quick Collection, it says 5 images. Okay, I can do that. I can also go down back to my painter tool, okay, and now instead of painting keywords, I can paint target collection. So now I decide I want to add that one, and that one, and that one, and that one, and that one. Now I've got 10 images in my quick collection. Okay. Now, quick collections are designed to be temporary. They're, images that you're going to be working on for a specific purpose. But if you right click on it, you can save it as a what's called a dumb collection. So we're going to call this one Mike's Family. Okay. And here it says clear quick collection after saving. So if I click save, and I'm just going to minimize that and go to collections. Okay. I go down here, and now I have Mike's Family, January 2020. It has 10 images in it. Okay. So if I go back to my folder here and go back to, where was I, January? Because this collection now exists, I could pick this one, turn off the painter tool. I could take these images and I could add them directly to it. Okay. So I can create collections, groups of images that make sense to me for some purpose. Okay. But they're ones that I choose to be in there. You can also create, what are called collection sets. And so, for example, if I was shooting weddings, I could have a collection of bride photos, a collection of groom photos, a collection of family photos, whatever. You choose whatever you want. Okay. And under the collections, there's a positive plus sign here. If I click on that, I can create a collection, which is by default is a dumb collection. A collection set, which is like a folder within a group of folders, so it's a group of collections, or I can create a smart collection. I can sort by name, sort by kind, and again, you're probably not going to be able to see it on the video, but if you look at some of these collections here, here, and here, they have a little gear icon beside them, and those are smart collections. Okay, so what's a smart collection and how does it differ from a dumb collection? I'm just going to show you, for example, these up here, it says book collection. So in the book module up here, I turned it off, turn it back on. In the book collection, I can create a collection of images used in a book and then store those images in different books. Okay, I have a saved prints collection. So in the prints that I've made, these are saved prints. And then within the saved prints collection, I have another collection for 4x6 photos. So I'm often, rather than buying a card at the card shop, Marcia and I will buy just 4x6 photo paper and blank cardstock and make our own cards. Okay, so these are all 4x6 images that I've used to make cards. So this is a collection set within a collection set. Okay, but anything that has a gear beside it is a smart collection. And a smart collection is not images that are chosen specifically by selecting or and adding or doing it manually. Collection sets, smart collections are created using specific criteria. Okay, so we're going to go here. We're going to create smart collection, and we're going to call it. What are we going to call it? We'll call it VPMG because this is the Victoria Photometer Group. I can, if I want, store this new collection inside of a collection set or not. Okay, and then I start adding criteria. Now, on the most basic level in computer terms, you have three choices: and, or, and not. Okay, so I can choose A and B, C or D, not E, and then we can get fancier and we can say A and B or C, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So you can create multi-level structures. Okay, so here you have match all of the following rules, match any of the following rules, or match none of the following rules, and, or, not. Okay, so, and then we have our criteria. So all the time that you spent adding metadata to your files now starts to work for you. Okay, so under source, we have a specific folder or a specific collection. Under file name, etc. Date, we have the capture date, the day the image was made, or the day the image was edited. Okay. Camera info, this relates to specific cameras, specific lenses, exposure information, any location information that you've added into the metadata field. So if you're shooting in Israel versus Bali versus United States and you add that country information into your metadata, now you can create collections based on that information. Under other metadata, we have keywords, we have any searchable metadata, all of this stuff, again, you can read this as well as I can. Under development settings, we want to know any images that we've processed. Any images to which we've applied a specific preset, any images that we've cropped, size, we were looking for images that are at least 3,000 pixels or, whatever, color labels, or sorry, color profiles. So there are any number of so let's say date, capture date. Now we have is not, is after, is before, is in the last 30 days, the last 7 days. Let's say is in the range of 101. Oops, let me put an extra dash in there to, let's make it 0531. Okay. Now, unless you specify a folder under your criteria, it will include all of the images from your Lightroom catalog. Okay, so we're going to match all of the following rules. We're going to look for any images that were made between the 1st of January and the end of May and have a keyword. Keyword contains packet. Okay. Create. So now we've got the VPMG Smart Collection, has 61 images in it. And these are all images made in 2020 that have the keyword Beckett attached to them. Okay. If I want to change that, I can right click on it and say Edit Smart Collection. And these are my two criteria. Okay. So now, let's say if I want to do A and B or C. Okay. If I go up here, I can choose any. but that's A or B, and that's not what I want. I go back here and choose all. So now I've got A and B, but I want to add or C. If I click the plus sign, I can add a third one that's going to be A and B and C. That's not what I want. Okay, so let's undo that. The secret is you hold down the Alt key or the Option key on Windows. Okay, and now you see the plus changes to a hashtag. Okay, now if I click on that, I can change this to, I have the same options up here, but a subset. So now I can say capture range is this year, and the image, the keywords contain Beckett, or let's say the rating is greater than or equal to 4. Okay. So now my smart collection is going to show me images that are of Beckett made this year, or images that have 4 or more stars. And that's interesting. Oh, sorry. I did that wrong. Edit smart collection. Yes. I did that right. Okay. Let me delete that. Um, and you follow me too. I'm not sure why it's doing that. Call me a liar. Anyway, that's the criteria. Just double check something here. Let's make that any and save that. Yeah, so now I've got 8,273 images that are 3 or more stars and or contain Beckett or contain, but that's not working the way it's supposed to be working. How about if we do this backwards? Let's say rating is greater than 4. Let's remove these two, and we'll go down to Alt plus, and we'll say all of the following are true. So now we'll say the capture date is between um, capture date is before and other metadata keywords contains bucket. Okay, so that should work. So either any images that have 4 stars or any images that have these 3 criteria. There we go. So these are all images that have 4 or more stars or images that were made this year that have Beckett in them. And these are sorted by capture time. So there you go. I just had the order reversed. So that's, yeah, we're running up on 2 hours now. And Marcia's going to come back and beat down the door. But I hope you learned something. And if you have any questions, just feel free to leave a comment on the photo meetup page, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. And yeah, with that, we'll close that out. And here we go. Thanks for coming. And have a great night. Bye now.